Good evening and welcome to the July 2nd, 2020 meeting of the Middleborough Public Schools School Committee. I invite all our guests to comment if you'd like at any point, and we'll try to address as many as we possibly can. Each year, I have the distinct pleasure of chairing or beginning to chair this meeting as the superintendent of schools. As we've just had an election, I would certainly like to call the meeting to order. Secondly, I would like to congratulate incumbent Meg Jeunesse for being reelected to the school committee, and also newcomer Teresa Farley, and welcome both on board to the school committee. Welcome both and congratulations.
Thank you.
The next order of business at the meeting tonight is to take nominations for the chairperson of the Middleborough Public Schools School Committee. When this is done and an election is taken, that chair will then take this meeting over. So I will take now nominations from the school committee for the chairperson of the Middleborough Public School Committee. Do we have any nominations? Ms. Farley.
Mr. Lynch, as a newcomer, I've had the pleasure of the last couple of years just watching Mr. Young really just do a fantastic job with all of this, and especially given the times that we're in, I'd like to see him continue as chair. So I'd like to nominate Rich Young as continuing as chair.
Thank you. Teresa Farley has nominated Rich Young as the chairperson, a potential chairperson for the Middleborough Public School Committee. Do I have a second? I have a second.
I'll second.
Second from Greg Stevens. Okay. Do I have any other nominations for chair? Hearing and seeing none, I will now take a vote. The nominations are now closed, and I will now take a vote. Rich Young has been nominated as chairman of the Middleborough Public Schools School Committee. I will take a vote by person, please. Rich Oakley?
Aye.
Greg Rowe?
Aye.
Greg Stevens?
Aye.
Teresa Farley? I didn't hear it, but I saw her say aye. There she goes. I heard that. Thank you. Rich Young?
I will abstain.
Thank you. We have 5 positive votes, 5 yes votes, and 1 abstention. Rich Young is officially the Middleborough Public Schools School Committee chairperson. Once again, congratulations, Rich, and the meeting is yours.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate everybody here. I have enjoyed being chair. If you can't enjoy being chair, you won't do a good job. So I enjoy working with all of you, and Teresa, we look forward to working together. And I will also add that it is fantastic to work with administration, from the superintendent to all the principals to the vice principals. So I enjoy that a lot, and I want to thank everybody. Being that as it may, I'm going to move on with the rest of our reorganization. The chair will enter nominations for vice chair. Ms. Jeunesse.
Thank you. I would like to nominate Rich Oakley for vice chair.
Do I hear a second? I'm sorry. I have a second. Go ahead, Meg.
No, I was just going to say I think Rich has proved himself as a committee member, and I think he's really interested in continuing to learn more about the different committees and different administrative levels. So I think he would be a good option for us.
Are there any other nominations? Hearing and seeing none, then I'll close the nominations. And I'll ask all those in favor of Mr. Oakley. Mr. Rowe?
Aye.
Ms. Jeunesse?
Aye.
Ms. Farley?
Aye.
Mr. Stevens?
Aye.
Mr. Oakley?
Abstain.
And the chair votes aye. So congratulations, Rich Oakley, and welcome.
Thank you very much.
The next item on the agenda, the chair will entertain a motion to name Christine Weston secretary to the school committee. Mr. Stevens makes the motion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second.
Discussion. This is our usual motion. This is what we normally do. Christine is our secretary. So this just has her become that position. Teresa, did that answer your question? Okay, no problem. I'm going to try to go through these and explain why we do each two. Any other nominations? Seeing none, it requires a roll call vote. Mr. Rowe?
Aye.
Ms. Janess,
Aye.
Ms. Farley,
Aye.
Mr. Stevens,
Aye.
Mr. Oakley,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. Next item on the agenda is, it's a typical one we do. We adopt Robert's Rules of Order, the 11th edition. The 11th edition is the newest edition and the edition from 2011. So I look for that motion.
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Hearing a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, Mr. Rowe,
Aye.
Ms. Janess,
Aye.
Ms. Farley,
Aye.
Mr. Stevens,
Aye.
Mr. Oakley,
Aye.
and the chair also votes aye. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the signing of warrants, and I'd like to remain what we've done in the past. Normally speaking, we usually do, the chair has the ability to sign warrants, and we have one other member. Given that we're in the middle of a pandemic, I think it makes sense that we are all allowed to sign the warrants. Normally, I will sign the warrants, and if for some reason I can't, I'll ask the business office to let one of you know so you can sign. In the past, it had always been Brian and I. Just so everyone understands what happens with the warrants are prepared. Generally speaking, I look through the warrants, I sign them. If I have questions, I'll ask Sarah or the people who prepare the warrants. Sometimes I won't sign something until I have my answers. Most of the time I will sign them and just want an answer. The other piece with that is, even though I'm signing them, the same warrants appear on all our agendas, and that's what we do under the consent agenda. The warrants are there so you all see them so it doesn't go away. So the chair would entertain a motion to allow any member to be able to sign the warrants.
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Discussion? Mr. Oakley.
Mr. Chair, I wondered if you, I never asked this question previously, but I'm interested in the answer. What lands something at your desk to sign for a warrant? Is there a certain threshold above which it needs to be signed by school committee, or how does that work?
It's just something that sort of appears to me to be odd. Okay, and so since I've been signing the warrants for 7 years, I'll give you for example. For instance, if I get on the warrant, let's say in November or December, a bill for textbooks. I generally believe all textbooks should be bought prior to the start of the year, but there could be some reasons that textbooks are being bought in the middle of the year. For example, they could be workbooks. They could be a bill that came late. It could be a class that's going to start in next semester. There's a wide variety of reasons, so that would be something I would ask about. Also, if we were buying something in an odd number that I didn't understand why we were buying it, and just those type of things. I rarely have those kind of questions, but it happens probably once or twice a year. Teresa,
Okay.
you had a question?
I do. So just to be clear, if we're allowing each of us to have that right to sign a warrant, we would be having that discussion with you beforehand, so we would know what we're walking into. I don't want to be, I just want to make sure we're clear in what we're signing or anything.
Yeah, so what normally happens is Pam will get hold of me. She'll ask me to sign a warrant. If for some reason I can't, she'll outline sort of parameters about when it needs to be signed by. Generally speaking, she sends me an email on Friday, and I show up on Monday and do it. And it's usually not a problem. I also let her know when I'm on vacation and out of town, or if I'm away on business, so she knows she can call another member and ask. What I've usually done in the past with that too is I'll usually send you all an email to let you know that I'm out of town and on business, and so if they need something, one of you will have to do it, or usually the vice chair would do things and that kind of thing. So that's how everyone will always know for what's happening.
Okay, thank you.
And just to be clear, every piece of purchasing for the schools is done through the warrants. So everything that's bought by the schools has to be signed off by one of us and has to be voted on us at a later meeting.
Okay.
Okay? Any further questions? Hearing none. All those in favor, we'll do a roll call. Mr. Rowe?
Aye.
Ms. Janess?
Aye.
Ms. Farley?
Aye.
Mr. Oakley?
Aye.
Mr. Stevens?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Hold on one second. I'm going to try to turn up my phone just to make sure. Oh, Teresa, can you turn up your phone? That was the chat piece. Thank you. The next part is the subcommittees. So what I'm going to do is what I've done in the past, which is I will send you everybody a list of subcommittees, and you can put the subcommittees you're interested in serving on. And then at either the next meeting or the meeting after, I'll appoint everybody to subcommittees. Okay. So we'll skip that piece.
Just want to check. Can you hear me better now?
Barely.
Okay. Not sure. What's
You're
happening.
very muffled.
I think, is the microphone pointing down? Do you know? Can you flip the phone all the way around maybe? Hopefully it'll fix the video.
Then you're upside down. If I
Oh,
do
but
then
it
she's
sounds so much
upside down,
better
too.
though.
that. Okay.
It's too bad it doesn't flip the video.
Hmm.
You have screen lock on?
Oh, that sounds good.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's much better.
Okay, I'm just holding it differently. I'm not sure. Okay,
also
I'll
won't-
try to hold it like this.
We won't do meeting dates and times because we're not meeting at a specific date and time currently, primarily because we're meeting when we have information and go from there. So we'll do that. I don't think we have anything else. So with that, the chair wants to obtain a motion to adjourn from reorganization.
So moved.
Do I hear a
Second.
second? So hearing that,
Second.
hearing any discussion, seeing none. Mr. Rowe,
Aye.
Ms. Janess,
Aye.
Ms. Farley,
Aye.
Mr. Oakley,
Aye.
Mr. Stevens,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. So we will convene back to the regular meeting. Again, I just want to make sure everyone's aware you can ask a question if you want to, and we will try to get back to it as soon as we can. I'm just going to my agenda page. So that piece. Sean, do we have Frank on? Then I will move on to the superintendent's report at that point.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm back. We have not seen Frank at all, so if he shows up, we can certainly, if with the school committee permission, we'll certainly go back to him. I have no problem doing that. First of all, I want to start with a COVID-19 update and the initial fall guidelines that came out last week from the governor, from the Commissioner of Education, and from the DEAS, or the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. They put out initial guidance, as it's called, regarding the reopening of schools in the fall. And I sent out a press release last week. Hopefully you've all read it. And it included notes about the fact that we appreciate the work that went into this. It's about a 30-page document or thereabouts. Great deal of work, great deal of latest medical expertise. And certainly we share the goal with the Department of Elementary Ed, and share the goal with the Governor Baker that we return to in-person schooling as soon as possible. Because as has been said by them, and by myself certainly, that in school is the best way to meet students' academic, physical, social, and emotional needs. We certainly understand that the initial guidelines that went out were characterized as guardrails and don't necessarily address every single topic. There'll continue to be guidance coming through the summer as this pandemic situation is constantly evolving. The commissioner has said to superintendents, we're going to take your information, we're going to ask you to put together some plans, and then we're going to put it in the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education pressure cooker, if you will, and look at greatest common factors and determine what's the best way for the state to go forward, and then provide further guidance as we get closer to the year based on this emerging situation. And unfortunately, it's all emerging and it's in fluctuation as more research and more documentation comes out. I think certainly in Massachusetts, by the looks of things, that we are certainly in a better position than a lot, given the fact that even as of Monday, Governor Baker announced today that we'll be going to phase 3, and there will be all kinds of new openings that are happening as of next week. But the full document was posted on our website. There's a link to it. There was a link to it in the press release. But basically, the document said that the current medical research supports a safe in-person return to school with preventive measures in place, as infection and transmission rates are lower for children than adults. Preventive measures should always include masks and face coverings, physical distancing, hand washing, and cleaning frequently frequently touched surfaces, masks and face coverings will be required for all students in grade 2 and above if they're in school. And then grades 1 and below, it'll be optional as students are possible to do it. And obviously it's based on conditions, but based on the current medical research and in conjunction with other preventive measures, a minimum physical social distance of at least 3 feet has been established by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. So they've said the guidance is at least would try for 6 feet, but no further than 3 feet. And that sort of changed things with our ability to transport students a little bit, and it certainly changed things with the number of students we can fit in the classroom. So moving forward, our school district will need to review all of this guidance carefully and develop 3 plans. The first would return to full in-person instruction with safety requirements. The second would be a hybrid type learning that combines in-person and remote learning. And the third would be a fully remote learning environment. If we have a spike and if things are returned back to, unfortunately, the situation we had in March and April and May, and we have to close down again, we need to be prepared as a school system full of fully remote learning. We understand as a school district, obviously, that families will have many questions as we move forward. We are going to go through this process as a group of administrators and try to develop these 3 plans. And at different times during the process, we're going to reach out to parents and guardians and the public and ask for input. We will try to account, obviously, for the needs of every student in the district. And that's very important to us as we move forward through this process. The Middleborough Public Schools is committed to hearing all voices and will continue to do that. The final product will then go to the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, be reviewed by them, and then sort of sent back to us as a state recommendation, not specific to Middleborough, my understanding is there'll be state recommendations that come out that will hopefully contain most of our program recommendations that we are making for Middleborough, and allow us the freedom to do things the Middleborough way based on the state guidance. So that's our hope as we move forward. It is sort of a trying time. We begin with an administrative meeting. We've already had an administrative meeting on this topic, several obviously, but since the guidance came out, we've had one. And our plan is to now move forward with a sort of a plan that begins next Tuesday with a 4-hour administrative meeting, going through this. And the first thing we're going to try to do is develop the fully remote learning environment based on all of the information that we have in the administrative team. We'll then, week by week, develop our plans, and then those plans will be vetted through the public and try to get people's input and as much as we can. Again, we'll get input. We're not going to be able to sort of please everyone, if you will, but we'll put together a plan that will try to basically take everyone's concerns into account. So that is the plan moving forward with regard to the fall reopening guidance and what the Middleborough Public Schools administration has planned. Trying to put these 3 plans together for submission to the state. Obviously would love, and we certainly will have school committee approval on this, and we'll have these documents to school committee and let you take a look through them and ask questions and provide obviously input to the school administration. So certainly if anybody has any questions on that piece, we certainly go forward. I would certainly welcome Dr. Gates into the conversation also to talk a little bit about our plan as a group of administrators and what that's going to entail. So Dr. Gates, if we could get Dr. Gates on stage, and I apologize for the school committee member or two that may need to take a back seat here, but you can also, if you have a question, you can notify Sean and Sean will pull you back into the conversation. So Dr. Gates, welcome. If you could talk a little bit about our meeting today and our plan moving forward. Myself, Dr. Gates and Carolyn Lyons got together today and sort of put the frameworks together based on some frameworks that Dr. Gates had come up with, and we're moving forward. So Dr. Gates.
Thank you, Superintendent Lynch and school committee members. Welcome, Mrs. Farley, to the committee, and welcome back, Mrs. Janess. As Superintendent Lynch said, we met today, myself, the superintendent, and Mrs. Lyons, our Director of People Personnel Services. We had been trying to come up with an efficient way for our team to collaborate on developing our remote learning plan, as we feel that that is an important piece for us to develop that will influence the plans for both in-person learning as well as hybrid. We are going to look at all sorts of elements of remote learning, particularly learning lessons from the experience that we had during this most recent closure of school, which we'll be sharing shortly with you, the results of that survey. But we plan on engaging our district administrative team, which consists of the folks that met today, plus our principals, as well as Mrs. Sarah Hickey, our Director of Business and Finance, and Mr. Siciliano will be there as well to help support us with our technological needs. But we're really hoping to have a plan that is cohesive across the district because we know that we have many families that have children in multiple schools, and we want there to be as much coherence as possible. And obviously learning from the lessons that we experienced during this recent closure. So I can speak more in depth about what we have planned for Tuesday, Mr. Lynch, if you'd like, but I don't know if those details are absolutely needed at this time.
I would certainly open this up to questions from the school committee if anyone has any questions with regard to this.
So, Mr. Lynch, one thing that I want to say beforehand, because Mr. Rowe and I had a conversation this afternoon. When you send out the 3 plans, you have to send out 3 distinct plans, especially to the state. So when we ask people for them to review them and check them, they should really look at them in accordance to what they're asking. So if we have to go to a remote alternate weeks or remote part-time, look at it in that way. Don't say I don't want to do it. If the state requires us to go to a plan like that, we'd rather have input from people saying, I like this part of it, I wish you did this, or I wish you did that. So don't flat out say, ignore a plan just because you don't like it, because ultimately the state may require us to go to it at some point and we need input from people. Am I correct in that, Mr. Lynch?
That's correct, Mr. Chair, and I think it's important to note that I know there's been some feedback on this press release, both positive and negative in the community, and I certainly understand that. There's a lot of resistance from folks about their children wearing masks, and they don't want their children to wear masks. It causes anxiety. It causes a lot of concern for some students. The current guidance from the state says if students are attending public schools in Massachusetts, they will have to wear masks if they're in grade 2 and up, unless they have a medically documented excuse not to. So that's the type of thing that is, and as much as we'd love to give people their personal freedoms when it comes to such things, the reality is that if that guidance is provided by the state, then we as a school system would have to live by that. But there would be 3 distinctive plans. The first one would be in-person, at school, reopening. Middleborough Public Schools would be open for business every day. The second would be a blended, where students would be in and out of school. Some districts and some plans have been a week in, week out. Some are every other day. Some are every couple of days with AB days. That would be things that we determine. And then the third would be the complete stay-at-home piece, which would look far different from the program that we had in place earlier. I guarantee you that it would be much more of a structured at-home school day. But obviously, that is something that we don't want to do. Our option number 1 is the preferred option. We certainly agree with the state on that.
And one last thing, you mentioned it, people mentioning on social media and everything like that, I want to be clear with. People have sort of said, well, the superintendent could decide not to do it and to ignore the advice of the state. And I want to point out to people, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Lynch, the state certifies your license to be a superintendent. And failure to follow rules of the state could mean that they could remove your license. Am I correct in that?
That would be a correct statement, Mr. Chair.
And the same applies to the principals and administrators. They're all licensed by the state, and the state can choose to remove their license if they view them as having done something not allowed under state rules.
That would be my understanding, Mr. Chair.
Okay. So, because I think people have this idea that, as school committee or as superintendents, you're allowed to do whatever you want, and that's not the case. I mean, when the state puts out an edict, we're mandated to follow it, and so I think that's the piece I want to get across to people. I'm not trying to scare people. I'm just trying to say there's no way, if the state says we have to do something, we can decide on our own. We can't do it. That just doesn't happen. And I know other members had. So, Mr. Stevens, you had a question.
Well, I think that's more of a comment. I read the document that the state put out, and I just want people to know that what's impressive to me is the amount of science background that they put in there. They referenced a lot of studies. They know what other countries are doing. So the things like the 3 foot, yeah, that's the guide. The last page or 2 pages has all the references. But the 3 foot guidelines, some people might think, why are they going to 3 feet now when we were told 6 feet? But they actually have studied that 3 feet with other precautions such as masks are, I think it's like a 70% reduction or something. But there's a lot of numbers in there. So people, if they have questions about where are these guidelines coming from, that document has a lot of background. And the other thing I want to say is I know the special needs students will be prioritized in terms of in-person learning. The kids that need the support in school will be given priority, is my understanding as well. So I just want to bring those up.
All those points are correct, Mr. Stevens.
Mr. Oakley, you had a question.
Mr. Chair, I found the document incredibly interesting, and like Mr. Stevens suggested, the number of references to publications that they used in there was comforting. And I was also surprised at some of the things that they mentioned about transmission rates among children. And although I know that there is some discussion around if individuals are asymptomatic, the data about transmission is a little harder to consider fact, but I still was pretty encouraged by the whole document. And one question I had, understanding that a lot of these details are going to be worked out, so obviously maybe now is not the time to go super in the weeds, but I was just curious with regards to the funding mechanisms that they mentioned in there. There's a lot of acronyms, but the ones that I had listed were CVRF, both rounds 1 and 2, the money from the EOE, the ESSER, and the matching remote learning tech grants. I just wanted to ask, I guess, have we applied for all of those that are applicable to us? And do we know yet if we got all of those?
Through you, Mr. Chair.
Please.
We were awarded the ESSER grant, which is the Elementary Secondary Relief Fund grant. So that did come to us, and we've ordered a good deal of PPE equipment from that already. We will use that money, as mentioned in the last school committee meeting, to fund the other half of the nurse coordinator because of the importance of obviously the medical community, the addition of medical community members to our school system. So that money will be paid. The other money that is mentioned, and it's been mentioned on a number of occasions, that money that's coming, $202 million from the state with regard to the $225 per student, Middleborough is excluded from that money because Boston and Plymouth County chose to take that money directly from the federal government. So Plymouth County took the $90 million So the state does not control that money anymore. Plymouth County does. So we would get our money, any relief money for us, from Plymouth County. So what we're going to do as a district is we would put together plans, and that's a reimbursable grant, as I understand it, and Sarah can probably help me out on this, but that is one of those grants that we buy things, and then we submit money, the receipts to Plymouth County, and Plymouth County would reimburse us. For example, we need to even the playing field when it comes to technology. We need to even the playing field to make sure every student has some type of unit that they can, a computer unit that they can use every single day if we go to distance learning. What we've ordered now is 2,000 additional Chromebooks for our school system, upwards of $400,000 worth of computers. We're also going to buy hotspots and charging units, everything that comes with those computers. So that money will then be, hopefully, reimbursed by Plymouth County to the tune of almost $400,000 for our district. But we've laid out the money initially. And then we get reimbursed. That money comes back, and then we can reuse it. But our intent is to, the state is saying $225 per student. Middleborough should certainly get at least that $225 per student for our students, trying to even the playing field when it comes to equity and when it comes to trying to make this work. So it is our intent that every student will have their own, will be one-on-one really as a district. If we go remote learning, every student will have a technology, will have a computer, either a Chromebook or a laptop at home.
That's excellent. Thank you.
That's just an example of that. Sarah, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Thank you, Superintendent Lynch. That was really quite clear on your part. So the process for all of the Plymouth County towns is very similar from town to town. Each town has a point person. Our point person here in Middleborough is Fire Chief Lance Benjamino, and he has been aggregating all of the expenditures. For example, we have for the school building project, we have incurred, over the life of the project, we will incur additional hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of costs because of the mitigation that had to be done for COVID-19. And so that is something that is going to be submitted for reimbursement. So Chief Benjamino, thank you very much for the work that he does on that. And as I said, he aggregates all the information for all the departments in the town and submits that to Plymouth County.
Great. Thank you for the explanation.
Okay. If there are any other questions, I can certainly move on. Oh, Mr. Chair, go ahead.
Mr. Rogarete.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Lynch, this is, from my impression, the second set of guidelines we have gotten from the state. Do these feel more permanent than the previous, or do you feel that they may change yet again?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. These are more refined with every document that comes out. This new document, this 28 or 29 page document that came out, is much more specific with regard to the asks for school system, based on, and Mr. Stevens made the point, based on and inclusive of medical research with regard to distancing. So this is much more refined. I think we will then submit our plans, and that what we'll get back from the state will be even more refined based on school input. They do have a committee that involves a lot of school people, a lot of medical people, and they're trying to put these things together. But what they want now is to put this guidance out, that then get the guidance back from the school departments, and then make decisions moving forward based on all that collective knowledge.
Good, right.
And just to follow up, part of that guidance they have given you, there are some things that are still left out from my understanding, such as buses, athletics, what to do if someone does become infected with COVID. Those things are still we're waiting to find out from the state what they want on that. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is correct. When asked the question to the Commissioner of Education about sports, for example, he just says that he's in constant contact with MIAA and Bill Gaines, and they're trying to work things out from that level. There's been all kinds of discussions about sports, and Ryan Sylvia is coming later in the evening here, and he may be able to add some more information because he monitors that constantly, and That's what an athletic director certainly should be doing. But there are a lot of question marks about transportation still, and we don't quite have answers. We've had a reach out. Tracy Donahue, who's our bus manager from First Student, reached out yesterday and said, I'm ready to talk and sit down and talk about what the transportation looks like based on the 3 foot. So we're going to move forward with conversations with her and start that. But no, to answer your question, there has been no specific guidance with regard to sports or transportation that has come from the Commissioner of Education and the State Department of Elementary and Secondary Education.
Greg, 1 second. Teresa, go ahead. Ask your question, Teresa.
Mr. Lynch, just regarding the mask and the mask breaks, I believe that I read that they would give some more guidance, but I'm just sort of curious if you have an idea if that is going to be something that we as a district are able to determine, or if we have to wait until they give us that guidance.
Through you, Mr. Chair.
It's like students sitting at his own desk, would they be able to take their mask off? I think that's still a little bit unclear.
Yeah, well, through you, Mr. Chair, my understanding right now is that students will be required to wear masks from the 2nd grade up, and certainly strongly recommended from grade 1 down. But in terms of the classroom, I still think they're talking about 6 feet, but that's going to get more specific as we move forward.
Okay.
So I don't think that'll be left up to the individual schools. I think there'll be specific medically guided information or recommendations. I wouldn't even say they're recommendations. I think my understanding is they'll come out and say, this is the way it will be in every Massachusetts public school.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Greg, you had another question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. Just a final question here is, as we move forward through this is encouraging. This feels a lot better than the last group of guidelines that we got. They're a lot clearer. I think they're a lot more manageable, and we can see it happening. If we do get our wish and we have in-person school starting in September, will there be an option for students, but also especially teachers who might be more at risk from COVID-19 to opt out or have alternatives built into their plans? Just because we don't want, the last thing we want to do is open up and put anybody at risk. So will there be options for teachers and students to?
Through you, Mr. Chair, entirely agreed, Mr. Rowe, that there'll be accommodations made for folks with health conditions. Obviously, we need to do that, with doctor's notes and things such as that. Obviously, everything needs to be medically documented when you come to doing things such as that. So we don't know exactly what the plan will be moving forward. There have been legal recommendations made by different groups, including MASC and MASS. Our own attorneys will weigh in certainly as we move forward with our plans, and those decisions will be made on an individual basis. But I agreed, we don't want to put anyone, any student or any adult in any school at risk based on their current medical condition or future medical condition.
Thank you.
Any other questions about COVID? Mr. Oakley.
Sorry, just one last one. I saw mention in the DESE guidance, they talked about cohorts, and they made some recommendations for, I forget what the break was, but I think it was elementary versus high school. And I just wondered, what is the feasibility of doing any sort of thing with cohorts in high school?
Thank you, Mr. Young, and through you, Mr. Chair. Right now, and I know where you're going with this, Rich and Mr. Oakley, and I think that at the elementary school, the cohort is the individual classroom. At the middle school, the cohort is the team, and we have all of our middle schools are divided into teams. So those would be a natural cohort. At the high school, it will be much more difficult to design cohorts, and that'll be part of this plan moving forward to see if there's something we can do, whether it be grade level. But the problem with the high school is sometimes you have a freshman or a sophomore who are taking AP classes with seniors, and students are going from floor to floor and department to department. Traditionally, the departments have been placed around the same area. The math department in the high school is in the same sort of wing, science department in the same sort of wing. So as students go from subject to subject, they go from place to place in the school. So much more difficult to design cohorts at the high school. I think we'll do the best we possibly can to do so. We have a couple programs that sort of are cohort designed with the freshman and sophomore program. But moving forward, we'll have to work with Mr. Brannigan and the high school administration and the high school staff to look at those and how we might develop cohorts at the secondary level, at the high school. The junior, I think middle school, we have it set at Nichols Junior Middle School. But that's, as we move forward, the high school will be a different ballgame.
Got it. Thank you.
Brian, I saw a couple of questions online that I'm going to ask. The first is, do you know if there will be chorus and concert choir?
It is certainly our intention, if they were in school, our chorus rooms and our band rooms are large enough to distance and socially distance, and it would be our hope that we would move forward certainly with music programs and choral programs, because that's part of what motivates some students to go to school, and that's part of the larger experience. So it would be our intention to do as much of that as we possibly can. Looking at band rooms and looking at choral rooms across the district, they're much larger rooms. They're terraced in general, and we would hopefully be able to utilize that spacing to continue our choral and music band programs, orchestra programs, those programs that are so important to that sort of that side of a student, that part of a student that it really appeals to. So.
And then one other question, Brian, that came in. Well, what are you going to do with the kids in elementary school for desks?
Well, that's the whole thing. We have to live by the 3-foot rule. So we would be doing either desks or we'd be doing tables, but we'd have to live by the 3-foot rule. So that's how we've started to plot out designs, and that's part of this planning process, is to take the outside of a room, remove all the furniture that we can do without, and then space the class out 3 foot by 3 foot, and try to fit as many students as we can in. And then if we need to possibly hire another teacher at a grade level, we will need to do that. And then we'll need to look at COVID-19 money and relief money and say, we need to add another first grade at such and such a school, or we need to add another third grade at such and such a school, because we have 26 students in the class and we need more space. So we have to do that. So all of that will come in the planning part that we're going to go through in the next month or so. And all of that will be designed with Mr. Hutchinson, who's already started. I went by the Berkeley School last week and sat with Derek Thompson and walked into a classroom with him and spaced it out. And he's got that design. He's been working with his custodians. And so, and I know I talked to Lisa Grimes today at NMKG. They're doing the same over there. She's working on that with Mr. Henderson. So our schools are already working on that. I've had conversations with Mr. Brannigan, conversations with Mrs. Latender up at the Nichols Middle School. And so all of that will be taken into account as we sort of space out these rooms and figure out if the class is too large, do we have to use a corner of a larger building? Do we have to use the media center? Do we have to use part of the cafeteria and sort of physically divide it from other areas? So there's a lot of thinking that has to go on in this planning, and that's part of why we have a really strong administrative team, and I have confidence in their ability to figure these things out.
Great. Any other questions for the superintendent? Then I'll turn it back to your report, Mr. Lynch.
Thank you, and I will move on from there to the question has come up to this committee before, and how are we going to assess how we did with distance learning and remote learning and the extended learning plan that we did. And we've said repeatedly that the best way we've known is to actually reach out to folks and survey them, and with direct asking for their direct guidance or their direct response to questions that are specifically designed to evaluate how we've done. I've asked Sean Siciliano and Dr. Melanie Gates to reach out and complete these surveys, and I would invite Dr. Melanie Gates back into the audience, back on stage, if you will, to talk about some of the results of this surveys with regard to the end of year, and I would introduce her as the new Director of Curriculum, Instruction, and Technology for the Middleborough Public Schools as of yesterday. So congratulations, Dr. Gates, and we look forward to working with you under some of the new capacities that you have. So thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Lynch. I'm going to do a screen share to share the results from our end of year extended learning survey. So just bear with me as I do that. And here we go. Mr. Siciliano and I put together this survey that was shared out on June 19th via email, text, and social media to our families. We kept the survey open until the 26th, and we received just 841 responses. I think people were somewhat fatigued with being engaged with technology, which may be some of the reason behind such a lower response rate. But nonetheless, the responses that we got were very meaningful. The first question that we asked is, how would you rate the Middleborough Public Schools on supporting student learning during the period of school closure? On a Likert scale, this question went from 1 being didn't meet expectations to 5 exceeding expectations. And if we look at 4 and 5 together, we got about 68% above that. You add another 20 for a neutral response. And I think that puts us up rather well in that we did support student learning during the period of school closure as best as we can, given the circumstances. We then asked, do you feel that our faculty and staff were responsive to our children's academic needs? And you can see from the orange response of yes, that was pretty overwhelming. I did have a category of other, and that is some families chose not to answer specifically yes or no when they gave some additional response. And even within that other category, there was a lot of yes, I felt my child's academic needs were supported. But there was also some concerns that were raised as well. And we've been reviewing this data, and we will be acting upon it, particularly on Tuesday when we meet as a team to discuss what remote learning will be looking like, excuse me, if we are forced to do so again in the fall. Social emotional needs is something that's very important to us. It's been an initiative in the district under Superintendent Lynch's leadership that we have been focusing upon. We've, as an administrative team, had professional development in it that has helped us to then support our faculty and staff. And we've also partnered with Character Strong to help us in this area as well. And again, we got an overwhelming yes response that we do feel that the faculty and staff were responsive in this nature. We then wanted to see how people felt about our communication methods. And again, similarly, we did receive high regards in that area of exceeding expectations and meeting expectations as well. We wanted to see how communication was from the school. And again, you can see that a very overwhelming number of exceeded expectations. I think the communication that came out from the school administration as well as our building-based faculty and staff was great. I know many of us were on our computers what seemed like 24/7. And I think it was just important for us to have that focus of being able to support one another. Because it wasn't just in terms of the academic needs that we were supporting. We were trying to support one another as human beings, and I think communication is quite vital in that area. This question was, how did you, please rate how your child or children engage with extended learning? Again, on a Likert scale, from my child required direct and constant support from an adult in the home to my child worked independently. And you can see that the results here were quite varied. And as I was reflecting upon the data, I couldn't help but think back to my days in the classroom and thinking about the variability of needs just within the classroom in a brick and mortar setting. So these results were not all that surprising, but it's still a lot of information to glean from this as we think about what remote learning should look like in the fall if we are to enter back into that realm. But again, our focus is going to be on getting our children back into our schools, because we feel that is, what's best to promote their academic, social, and emotional learning, hopefully within the, parameters of health and wellness, providing that. We wanted to know how important extended learning was in your home. How did families view this? And it's important for us to understand how families were viewing it, because this will help us think about the impact of remote learning in the future. And again, we received high marks in this, and that, many families treated it as important as a normal school day. But we have to understand that the context of each family was unique, and that challenges did exist in reading into the data and some of the narrative comments provided by families, you're learning that you've got 2 essential workers in a home, people working 3rd shift and still trying to maintain their home as well as supporting their child's academics. So, this data certainly tells us a story, and it just reminds us that there is a high degree of variability, and we have to be exhaustive in our approach to how we support learning if we are to continue with remote. We wanted to understand areas that we felt that the community felt that we excelled in, and communication by faculty and staff rose to the top, as well as communication from our school administration, and weekly extended learning plans and communication by the district. And of course, if you ask what you think we did well, and we should also ask where we did not meet expectations. And here there was some concern with the weekly extended learning plans, and within the narrative information that was provided, some of it was just the confusion of access of those plans, the details of description of the activities in some of those plans. A lot of great information that we will certainly learn from. So within that narrative feedback, there was quite a bit, and I tried to glean out some of the themes that were here. An obvious concern was just the change to the extended learning plan over time. We felt as a district it was important for us to be responsive to the changes that the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education were pushing out over time. And we deliberated over those, and we thought about what context that Middleborough had within them. So it did force us to change our approach over time, particularly in terms of things counting, grades counting, providing grades. And just the uncertainty of the entire situation did cause us to change course over time. Additional concern was families felt that they wanted more synchronous learning time, which means learning in the moment, that the Zoom sessions, while the check-ins were great and really appreciated, they also wanted there to be more synchronous learning, teaching and learning going on. There was high degree of interest in having a more structured school day, I think, to help develop consistency so families could know what to expect and how to better plan for their days. There was some concern that what we did put out in our extended learning plans and our weekly plans was overwhelming, but then in many instances, there were families that were asking for more rigor. And I think as a community, we have to step back and realize that there are different circumstances in each family, as identified in the next concern of the balance of work, home, and educating children. Everyone's situation was unique, which is why for some, the tasks were daunting, while for others, they were looking for more for their children. Technology also was a concern, familiarity with programs that were now being used in the home. So for families, parents, or the adult that was providing the instruction, being familiar with such things as Google Classroom or ST Math. That we have a wide variety of programs that were being used, that we were inconsistent in what online platforms were being used. And connectivity was an issue. In some instances, people were commenting on a lot of dropped Zoom calls. And as you may even see in some of our meetings that are broadcast online, the Wi-Fi connections in homes do vary from time to time based upon demand, and that just presented challenges as everyone across the globe was really tapping into the internet during this period, and I'm sure that caused quite a drain on resources, not just within a home, but just across the world. It's important to also recognize the success, and I think there was a tremendous amount of success that was here. There was many times in reading the survey data that I was taken aback with such pride from the comments that were being shared by our families. That our faculty and staff did take the time to connect relationally with kids, which is what school is really about. It is about learning content and skills, but it's also learning how to interact with each other as human beings. And we still wanted to keep that vibrant during the period of closure. Many of our faculty and staff offered individualized Zoom sessions to personalize learning and make connections with children that were just struggling during this period. I put grading as a success, and I should almost put a little asterisk on there because there were some concerns raised about grading, but some of that was being represented more on an individualized level. but particularly at the secondary level where, individual assignments are being assessed and aggregated to determine a child's grade in their course. And through collaboration with Mr. Brannigan and Mr. Thomas while he was principal of the middle school, we took a lot of time to sit back and think about what is equitable in terms of grading. Our students didn't ask to not be in school. Our students didn't ask for this situation to happen to them. And we just felt that it was not fair to penalize them in any way because of it. So we really took great care in how we were determining grades, in particular overall, at the end of the quarters, at the end of the year as well. And many people commented on how they appreciated that. The response by administration, faculty, and staff, and you saw that within the survey questions themselves. There was a lot of praise that was given out for specific teachers, that they were just always on demand. In particular, Mr. Brannigan, he's very strong in his communication skills, and that was recognized by many, as well as many other administrators and faculty and staff across the district. Many people commented specifically on our ability to adapt on the fly. And while people were concerned with us changing the extended learning plan over time, they understood that we needed to be responsive to what the state was asking us, and we did so to the best of our ability and with what we felt was best for Middleborough and our students. And the amount of appreciation that was shared by families was just really powerful. And I just want to read one comment that was put in that I just think captures much of what was shared. Wood family had provided a statement. Thank you for stepping up during a difficult situation, putting our children first, and for understanding the different challenges that each family may have had during this time. And I think that just represents the approach that through Superintendent Lynch's leadership that we as a district took. It wasn't perfect by any means, but given the immediacy of this situation and the urgency to which we had to act, I know for myself as both a member of the Middleborough Public Schools and a member of the Middleborough community, I am personally proud of all of the efforts that our students, our families, our faculty and staff, and my fellow administrators put forth. That is the conclusion of what I have for my formal slides, so I'll stop sharing my screen and come back into the meeting with you.
Like that, she was gone.
She'll come back.
All right. So I just have one question based on what was out there, and that has to do with, we put a lot on parents and the idea of like Google Classroom and Zoom and everything like that. Can we look at the idea of making sure that we have some sort of trainings for parents so that if we have to go back to these things at some point, and not necessarily with COVID-19, but the next thing to condemn, that we can at least give parents an option to look at ways that they can learn on the fly too.
I don't know if Melanie's going to pop back in here, but I know that she and Sean Siciliano had developed some helping guidelines for parents. But I believe if we go remote, then we'll have much more formal training for parents. That's our plan.
Okay.
And I think Melanie Gates is coming back in here. And
Sorry for that.
Welcome back.
There was a question sort of related to that, Mr. Young, Mr. Chair, that came up a little bit in the discussion on the public comments. And there was a question about whether or not parents would have the option if they desire to do remote learning, or if the district required people to come to school. At this point, if people want to, and I don't want to take a hard line on this, I just want to say at this point, right now, if we reopen school, if parents want to keep their children home, the option would be homeschooling. And they would have to register their child through homeschooling through Dr. Gates, who coordinates that for the district, amongst the many things that she does for the district. There would be no option at this point. If we were required to do it, then we would be talking about possibly adding personnel. For example, we'd have a first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade, or an elementary at-home sort of coordinator to work with remote learning at home. Some of those other ideas, but those are the types of things that we're going to talk about in our planning process to make a determination as to what is possible to do, to see if there's funding for that at the state level, to see if we can possibly do that. So that's one of the ideas about required versus desired. And I understand that there are some kids that really flourished at home with the remote learning. That's more advantageous to that child, and I get that from the parental standpoint. But if we're all in at school, we would have to bring in additional people to provide that sort of homeschool piece or that remote learning piece. And I don't want to call it homeschool. If we want to look at that model and say to the state, we'd like to do this in Middleborough, but this is what it would cost. And that's the type of thing the state's looking for. Is okay, there's an idea. And even if we go with a blended piece, and if we have students in a week and then a week home, or 2 weeks on and 2 weeks off, or something like that, if we look at the quarantine 2-week guideline, then we'd also be looking at those teachers that are working with, let's say, half the class. We'll be working with the second half of the class the next week or 2 weeks. So really couldn't take the time during the day to address the needs of those students who are home doing remote learning on the other week. So we would almost have to have some type of additional staff or supplemental staff to work with those students who are remote learning at home, who might have questions or have regular meetings with them, because the expectation would be there's some structure to that day when that child's home. And so there'd have to be some guidance by some type of a teacher person, and that would be the school's sort of responsibility, if you will. But to do that, it would be certainly a constraint on the budget, and would be something that would cost, and because we'd be hiring people. So those are the types of things that we have to look at in the school system, making our recommendations, turning them back to the state, and then the state would come back and make their final decision. So it's sort of a round and round circle here, and I apologize for that, but it comes back to that, what really the guidelines that will ultimately come out of the state, what they point towards.
So, Brian, while you and Melanie are here, I do have a couple of questions I see that I'm going to read off to you. Has there been conversation regarding grading moving forward with the different learning environments moving forward if the students aren't in the building 100%?
I missed the beginning of that, Mr. Chair. I apologize.
The conversation around grading, regarding grading moving forward if the children aren't in school 100%. Would there be a change to grading?
Well, if they're back in school 100%, then I'm thinking that we would go back to the traditional grading system of students producing work and having that graded by the teacher and feedback to the student and back and forth.
I think this is if they're not in the school 100%, Brian.
Well, I would say if the students, you mean the blended learning piece, Mr. Young?
Yes, blended learning.
I would say that part of the at-home piece would be assignments, whether they be short-term or long-term, that would then be returned to the teacher and graded. I would guess that to be graded. Yes, that to ask students to do work and not grade it, I think at this point, would not be part of a plan moving forward.
Okay.
Superintendent Lynch and School Committee Chair Young, may I just add a little bit more to that?
Please do.
A concern that we have also with grading is not having different plans for grading in case we have to flex in and out of these various situations. If we start in person and we have to go remote, and then we go remote and we have to come back into blended, or we have to come back into, we're coming back into school. We want to minimize that variability so that we don't make the grading situation even more complex. The changes that we made for this particular period was to be reflective of just the immediate nature of having to switch to a different modality of teaching and learning for our students, being cognizant of just the pandemic itself and what it was causing for situations in each home. But we haven't gotten into the details of it yet, but we have spoken on a higher level that, we would be having grades, and we want to try to make sure that if we have to flex out of the different types of learning environments, that the grading protocol, so to speak, would remain consistent. We also have some limitations with, and any school district would experience this, it's not just because of Aspen, But in how we set up grade books and how we do report cards, a lot of what we designed our grading system around was not having to change the backbone of Aspen, because particularly at the high school level, those grades filter into a transcript and they impact calculations of GPA, and you can't change the calculations for the moment without having to then go back and undo them. So it's just trying to make sure that the long-term impact of changings to grading and reporting of grading does not have a negative ramification on students in the long term. So it is something we've talked about at a higher level in terms of the details that'll be forthcoming, but the immediate response would be that there is an anticipation that assignments would count, there would be grades during any period of remote learning.
Thank you. The next question was, have any thought been given to recess or gym thus far?
Those, again, are guidelines, Mr. Chair, that will come from the state in terms of what we're able to do. We certainly have thought about it. We certainly know the value of play, and we know the value of what happens at recess, but we also know the nature of children. And the nature of children at recess is to play tag, and at recess is to get close to one another and chum around and be friends. And we don't want to discourage that, certainly. But we also want to encourage social distancing, which recess doesn't lend itself towards. I'm not giving an answer here, yes or no. I'm saying right now that we will take the medical guidance that comes out from the state on recess and apply it, because this is, quite frankly, one of those questions like transportation that really no guidance has come out specifically on, but there'll be more guidance that comes because there are too many questions about it not to ignore it at the state level.
So one other question, and then I have a couple of questions about masks. Has there any thought about combining HBB and MKG grade lesson plans for extended learning? Should that be the way forward?
I could certainly take that, and Melanie can certainly, Dr. Gage, you can certainly chime in here. Our thoughts are that certainly in terms of delivery and remote delivery, this should be fairly similar from grade to grade and from school to school, especially at the elementary level. Will there be differences between teachers? Because there's some academic freedom, certainly. But our curriculum is our curriculum, and the students should be paced through the curriculum at about the same level, depending on the individual student. So, and I certainly would invite Dr. Gates to supplement that comment with, hopefully the instruction is fairly uniform. And our idea moving forward would be to make that as uniform as possible. If we're looking at a remote plan, the day would be similar, instruction would be similar. But again, every student, my daughter was just in 5th grade. She graduated from 5th grade, but the student down the street now with remote learning, but down the hall in school doesn't necessarily get the identical instruction, but should cover the same sort of objectives, standards, if you will, benchmarks, and those are the things that we want to hit. Are those benchmarks and those standards. Dr. Gates.
Absolutely, Superintendent Lynch. I totally echo what you just shared. What's most important is that we all have the same desired outcome for our students. We also want to embrace the strengths that our teachers bring in achieving those outcomes. So we do not have a cookie cutter approach to teaching and learning, because we need to be not only bringing our own strengths forward as educators, but we also need to recognize what our needs are of our students and be responsive to that. So in terms of the absolute alignment between HBB and MKG, they do have the same outcomes that we are striving to achieve. During this period of remote learning, we did have weekly engagement plans by each building and grade level. And part of that was to still continue to build upon the small communities that we have in each school and allowing those teachers to collaborate more effectively. 6 or 7 teachers collaborating versus 14, 15 teachers collaborating on developing plans would have just, I think, taken away from some of the sense of community that we've built at each grade level. But those are continued discussions that we will have moving forward within our team. We just felt in the immediate need in response to the closure that working at a school level and grade level was what was best for not only our students, but our faculty and staff with their collaborations.
So the two questions about masks, the first one I can answer because I had a conversation with somebody on the commission about that. The question was, can we ask the state to look at our individual town COVID numbers and make mask requirements adjustments? And the answer is no. And it's primarily, I asked a question about countywide. And their comment to me was, because many of your employees come from out of state, out of district, out of county, they are going to go by a state rule. And that was the decision on that. The other question, Brian, I guess for you, has there been a specific kind of mask mandated, or are there options? This person mentioned face shields.
Through you, Mr. Chair, there have not been any specific recommendations with regard to what will be required in the fall with masks. What the ask has been is that students would provide their own masks coming into school with masks on, riding the bus with masks on. And then if a student's mask somehow malfunctioned or was soiled during the day at some point, that the school would provide additional masks that would meet the standard as dictated by the state. So.
Okay. And those are the questions I saw online. Sean, if you have anything else, feel free to put it up, but that's what I had. And Greg had a question. Mr. Rep.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. This is from Ms. Skates. Melanie, that was an amazing job getting all that information out. I was just wondering if you had a way to break it down by grade level. It's definitely, in my experience as a teacher and as a parent, it's a lot different when a 8-year-old Zooming and a 16-year-old Zooming. So is there any way for you to break it down? Because I do know that the plan, I believe, is to come up with a plan for elementary, middle, and high school, and they'll all be a little different going forward when it comes to remote learning.
We certainly have that capability of breaking the survey down by grade level. The first step that we did was just breaking it down by school. And that data has been shared with our principals for them to digest. And we're going to continue to dialogue about this data, as well as additional information we'll be acquiring. As Superintendent Lynch was saying previously, from the initial guidance, they wish for us to engage families in more surveys, as well. But yes, absolutely, we can break it down by grade level. We will be in future surveys constructing them perhaps a little bit differently, just so that the disaggregating that data becomes a bit easier, and help families be able to address perhaps more unique situations. If you have a 3rd grader and you have an 8th grader, they could be having a completely different experience, and we want to make sure that the questions we ask provide the opportunity for them to address it specifically for their 3rd grader and specifically for their 8th grader. But yes, we can, and we do have the data broken down by grade.
Great.
We just we didn't want to share that. I mean, you can take the data and go as deep as you want, breaking it apart, and just we thought for now, just trying to take the broad strokes to share with the community would be best.
Any other questions for this piece? Dr. Gates, as always, thank you for everything, and congratulations on your new title.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And she'll be back to visit us in a little while with another survey results. Survey says, as we move on to budget update town meeting, I do want to address, I saw one more question that probably should be addressed. The question comes from Sarah, who says, can we ask the state to look at our individual town COVID numbers to make mask requirements adjustments, i.e. not requiring them inside each classroom and just in hallways and bathrooms? The guidance right now from the state is not going to change from town to town right now. They're not looking at towns that have fewer numbers or towns that have larger, or cities that have larger numbers. They're not going to differentiate. They're basically making the guidelines in accordance with how the virus is transmitted. And those guidelines that have been sent out by the state and the CDC with regard to how the virus is transmitted a student wearing a mask is much more protection for everybody else in the room, as much not for the student. Sorry about that. Apparently somebody in the crowd didn't like that. So, but it's basically the mask wearing is something that's going to be universal statewide and not done town by town. So moving on to budget update, I just wanted to point out that at last week's town meeting, our budget passed unanimously from the town. I just want to say as school superintendent to thank, as a grateful superintendent and on behalf of an entire school community, I want to thank the townspeople of Middleborough and the people that did show up at the town meeting held at Nichols Middle School for the positive vote, for the thumbs up. I also want to thank the town manager and the selectmen for the job they do in making sure that a budget that comes out is balanced. As a school system, as you know, we did take a hit, a $300,000 hit, but we were also allowed to take some of the transportation money that was saved near the end of the year and sort of cover up for that hit, if you will, and balance that budget with that money. So the town get $300,000 back out of the budget from us, but we were able to recover some of that money with money we didn't spend on transportation that we would have, and that was maybe one of the few silver linings of the COVID-19 closure, was that we did save some money on transportation and substitute teachers. So that's just a quick budget update, and I don't know if Sarah has anything to add to that. There was a piece that came out, a question. The only real question on the school budget that came out was from a gentleman who had done his homework and was looking through the document and discovered that in the previous 2 years, it looked like the school budget for this year had been cut in half. That was a new software system the town has in place that basically, for whatever reason, doubled our budget from the last 2 years and made those our budgets. And it was almost, I think it was doubled exactly from what it had been the last 2 years. So it was just some type of button that was pushed that shouldn't have been pushed. But our budget went up gradually, and we certainly thank the town for recognizing that we do have cost of living raises and things as such. And we, at this point, we have not touched the classroom. We have not looked at class sizes. We looked at class sizes and said that's very important to us as a district, and we have not reduced any teachers in the district or ESPs at this point. So, anything additional, Sarah?
I'd like to echo everything that you had said. Thank you to the town for being so very supportive of the school system. Putting together the budget is never an easy task, but when the town is supportive of the school committee, it certainly helps. So thank you.
Yep, and in closing out that piece, I would just like to thank those members of the budget subcommittee who worked hard. It started off as Megan and Greg, and ended as Rich and Greg, and then Greg Stevens, and then it ended up as Rich and Meg Janess. But to you three school committee members who put in all the additional hours and the additional work to put that budget together, we certainly appreciate you for your service, certainly, but also for your work on the budget subcommittee. As we move on to the extended school year, we have an update, and I would ask that Sarah provide that. She has met with Carolyn Lyons and really worked out some real painstaking details, about a program that is sort of exciting. We're going to have our first kids back in school this summer. So, Sarah.
Thank you, Superintendent Lynch and school committee members. I'd like to start by saying welcome, Ms. Farley, and welcome back, Mrs. Janess, to your seats on the school committee. I'm really happy to be talking to you about extended school year tonight. Normally that is Mrs. Lyons's domain, and she's very modest about the work that she does, and I would like to be very complimentary of her and the work that she does. If you are familiar with the expression of flying the plane while you're building it, or building the plane while you're flying it, that is essentially what she and her team have been doing. She has an excellent team, and they've been working very hard, and the regulations from the state, the Department of Early Education and Care, the regulations have been changing almost on a weekly basis, and you need to make adjustments on the fly. And as the date to open extended school year gets closer and closer, the harder it is to make those adjustments. I wanted to let you know that out of the many things that were done to get the extended school year program ready was the purchase of personal protective equipment. We purchased about $15,000 worth of protective equipment for our staff and students and our transportation, our drivers and monitors. That was required by the guidelines. That was almost a impossible task to get that, but we've managed to, Cheryl DeBenedictis here in the business office managed to connect with a vendor, and that was delivered on Monday. We're really happy to have that all in place. The second part that I want to share about extended school year was the training and planning piece. The planning piece, again, Mrs. Lyons did the yeoman's work of putting together a guide. We had to have a guideline, a written guideline for the, I'm sorry, we had to have a written guideline for the families and to submit to the state. And Carolyn and her team worked very hard on that. There was also a portion of the guide, Carolyn Lyons and Jim Hudson, Director of Facility, and Mary Jane Driscoll, the transportation coordinator, and I all met and had a discussion about how does the transportation piece, how does the cleaning piece, how does all of this work? And we took the guide from the Department of Early Education and Care and dissected that in order to put together the handbook for extended school year. The second part of that is the training. So on Monday, July 6th, the transportation staff will be trained. And on Wednesday, July 8th, the instructional staff will be trained. And this training will cover the personal protective equipment and its use, and then also the contents of the procedure manual. As far as transportation is concerned, we were able to reduce the number of riders with the number of families that were willing to provide their own transportation. So thank you to those families. We have a transportation plan set, and the routes have been set as well. Those were sent out to the drivers today, and our out-of-district transportation starts next Tuesday, July 7th. So we have students that will be attending our in-district extended school year program, as well as programs in private schools that we send students to. So our first student will be going off on Tuesday, but our in-district program does start July 13th. So if anybody has any questions about extended school year, I might be able to answer them. I'll give it my best shot. I've spent a lot of time with this, but mostly on the transportation part because that falls within my purview.
Questions? Teresa?
So can you tell me how many families have taken advantage of it now, do you know?
I missed the everything after. Can you tell me?
How many families have taken advantage of the extended school year? I may have missed that, but your audio wasn't great, and I'm not sure if I missed you saying that or not.
I wouldn't have the numbers for that. I can tell you how many are being transported,
Okay.
but the overall number I don't know off.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
I can ask Carolyn to get that to you.
We can certainly get that information. I can get that information to you.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you, Sarah.
No other questions. Sarah's still there. She has an update on Champions before and after school summer program update. We were hoping to have another program in our schools this summer, the Champions before and after school program. With the help of Sean Siciliano, they got the word out. They emailed out the information, and Sarah has an update.
So Superintendent Lynch and I received an email last week from the director of our program here in town, and unfortunately they will not be able to run a program this summer. One of the highlights of their program is the flexibility in scheduling. You can have a student go 2 days a week, 3 days a week, 1 day a week, 5 days a week, and the guidelines for them from the Department of Early Education said they can only run a 5-day-a-week program, and there weren't enough families interested to meet their minimum cutoff. They had less than 10 families interested, so they will not be able to run that program this summer. They are able to run programs in both Norton and Seekonk if that program is of interest to any families, and you could drive to Norton or Seekonk for your student, but they're unable to run the program here in Middleborough.
And that's unfortunate. But it is what it is. The requirement to have the 5-day program was because there were people that wanted 3 days, wanted 2 days, wanted 4 days, but the 5-day piece was the kicker. And unfortunately, that hurt us, or it hurt Champions program. So, and that's unfortunate. Obviously, they'll be with us in the fall as we continue on with our partnership with Champions. So we look forward to that. They're great people to work with. They've been open, honest, great communicators, and I think that's really important as we move forward. So if there are no questions on that, then I will move forward with the summer athletic program update and invite Ryan Sylvia, our athletic director, to the forefront, to the stage. Hi, Ryan. How are you?
Hi, Mr. Lynch. How are you?
Welcome. And why don't you give us an update on the summer athletic program?
Sure. We opened the registration last week, and we sent a newsletter out. I sent a newsletter out on the 1st that kind of highlighted the summer program and some other things that are going on in the athletic department. We have registrations trickling in. We're at about 64 students right now registered for the summer program. The start of the summer program will be Monday the 6th, this Monday after the holiday weekend, and that's only for the strength and conditioning program. So that's the students entering 6th grade through 12th grade, meeting at the high school turf and track field. And one of the limitations with this program, or kind of a budget limitation, is we really need to fill all of the slots that were allowed, similar to the Champions program, in order for it to make sense financially. Not fill them, but we need to be pretty close to 10 registrations per coach that we have running each program. I'm confident that the programs running later in the summer will start to fill. We've got registrations in every program that we're offering so far. There's a possibility that we could cut some of the time slots for the strength and conditioning. Right now we have 3 time slots, 8 a.m., 9 a.m., and 10 a.m. on both Monday and Wednesday, and Tuesday and Thursday. So we'll see how those fill out. In my experience with athletics registration and summer camps, a lot of times these registrations are coming in Saturday and Sunday before the Monday program. So and even some on the day of. So we're going to monitor that. I'm going to be sending out communication this weekend to everyone who's registered to start next week, just highlighting all of the guidelines and requirements. One of the parts of the newsletter that went out was that the success of this program for the summer program really is going to depend on how well our families and our students follow the precautions and the guidelines that were required. I actually had a nice phone call with one of the health inspectors for the Middleborough Health Department today. I had sent them all the protocols that I developed to be in line with the state guidelines, and they approved those and said, it looks like you guys are doing everything that's required to stay safe, including wearing masks through all the transition times and arrival and departure, whenever physical distancing can't be maintained, and the screening process. One piece of the screening process we were able to streamline, because I know that in the last update I gave, we had talked about possibility of a paper questionnaire that answers 2 questions every single day. One being, have you had any of the COVID-19 symptoms, and listing the symptoms, and then the second one being, have you been exposed to anyone that's been that's had COVID-19, and every participant and staff member needs to answer no to both of those questions before they can enter the facility. What we did was made contact with a web developer that some other school districts and colleges and hospitals were using. And they were able to develop a simple website, Middleborough Summer 2020, for a minimal fee that basically updates every day, and that website is sent to all the participants in that email that goes out to those that are registered, and the parent fills out. It goes to the user's email of the registration, so the parent that registers their child, and they have to answer the question daily, and then it sends an email to me, our athletic trainer, and our head football coach, who's also running strength and conditioning. So the 3 of us will get an email, and it also sends an email to the participant with a pass that says the questionnaire has been completed with their name and their date, and allows them into the program for that day.
So, is there any questions from the school committee for Ryan? I know I have a follow-up question, Ryan. Don't go away at the end. I want to see if you can provide an MIAA update on fall sports, what their current position is. So right now, any questions with regard to the summer athletic program?
Other than thanks for setting up, Ryan. We appreciate everything you did for it. Teresa, you had a question?
Yeah, just regarding the masks, Ryan, I know that you mentioned in the registration that you'll be giving a mask rather than the t-shirt, which is great, but will they be required to wear a mask the entire time, or just when they can't socially distance and do their exercise or whatever that means?
So the first part of the question, we did order 200 masks, and 2.5 weeks was the timeline. So I think we should have them by the end of next week. So anyone registered for next week should bring their own mask. We'll also have some of the, those type of disposable masks that kids can wear if they don't have one. But we will get those in, and that's part of the registration fee, kind of a custom station mask, if you will. And then as far as wearing the masks, they are required to wear them whenever physical distancing isn't possible. So if we're out on the turf field and we have a group of 10 and they're, 15, 20 feet apart, going through speed ladders, agility drills, things like that, and we're going to be able to space them out a ton, we'll give them that option to loosen the mask. They can hang it down below, but we want it to be on them all the time, because as soon as they come back in for any kind of instruction or anything, the mask really has to be worn.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions of Ryan with regard to his summer athletic program? If not, we can move on to Ryan. If you could possibly provide, I know I'm putting you on the spot here, but an MIA update. I know you're keenly aware of what goes on up there in Franklin, and some of the discussions that have been constantly had with regard to fall sports. Can you provide any updates for the school committee and for the public in general about fall sports?
Yeah, and a lot of it is somewhat public knowledge. It depends how closely you follow some of the reports that come out from the MIAA. We're fortunate within our league. We have in the South Shore League, it's 10 different schools, and we're all very involved in what's going on here. We've been since the closures happened. We meet once a week as athletic directors within the league, and just been constantly trying to figure things out as they get thrown at us. Part of that is the MIAA has developed a task force, and they've tried to spread out different members throughout the state to be on that task force to tackle some of these situations that are going to come up. And one of the athletic directors in the South Shore League is on that task force, so we kind of get weekly communication on what's going on with that. But a document went out, an update from their last meeting. I'm just going to highlight some of the things that came out from it. And a lot of it kind of mirrors exactly what was talked about earlier in the meeting from a school standpoint, and that's where kind of the task force is taking their guidance from Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. Athletics is an extension of the classroom. That's how we're looking at it. So we have to make changes there. How are we going to do it with athletics? And so they're looking at a new normal in terms of if we do go back to school, what is that new normal going to look like, not just for school, but for athletics? And most of those are going to be, similar to what's going on in the classroom, a hybrid model. Some of the discussions around health and safety standards with personal protective equipment, outside versus inside activities, access and equity issues, transportation, the scheduling and timeline, a lot of the same things we're talking about the classroom. And then a remote option, same thing. How can coaches, use that special relationship that they have with their players, their student athletes, from a remote standpoint, and incorporating kind of the 5 pillars of the MIA: leadership, sportsmanship, coaches education, community service, and wellness. There's also a sports medicine committee within the MIA that's working on a return to play document. That's going to be submitted late in July to the board of directors. And all of this is really going to come down from the state guidance. And if we look through obviously we've all seen that document that came out recently for return to school. They did say we're going to receive additional guidance on extracurricular activities in there. And the MIA has been in close contact with a representative from Department of Education, has been at those meetings with that COVID-19 task force. A couple of other highlights that people might want to be aware of. A lot of discussion about extending the 13-month physicals to 18 months at least, to alleviate the rush for families to get that physical in. Virtual physicals have not been approved at this time, but that's also a possibility. Assuming that we're back in some way. A disclaimer and waiver document is being created, different forms of that, in terms of if you're able to participate, a waiver of some kind, the potential risks involved. The other things highlighted here. This one I liked because it said it encouraged athletic directors and school leaders to be in touch with their local health boards of health, which I think we kind of got a jump start on when people saw the information coming out from Middleborough athletics. I got a lot of contact from other towns and athletic directors saying, "How are you guys doing this? What's going on?" So I told them you got to talk to your board of health and your school committee. And so I was kind of happy about that. And then there were 2 kind of outside the box things that came up. Some spring sports happening in the fall because of the potential. All these spring athletes just missed their spring season, and there's potential, long range that they could miss it again potentially. And then moving the start date of the fall to August 1st, and ending the season in late October. Those 2 items, the spring moving to the spring sports moving to the fall, and starting sports in August, obviously there's a lot of different variables in there, and those are things that would have to be discussed, in detail to if they're actually going to happen. So I don't know what the realities of those are, but again, I think it all comes down from the state.
Any questions of Ryan through you, Mr. Chair?
Ryan, before you go, I think we'd be remiss not to mention to the whole athletic department how we feel sorry about the loss of Coach Lawrence. And so just wanted to convey those thoughts to you, my friend.
Thanks, Rich. Yeah, huge loss. I got to know Coach Lawrence really well as a phys ed teacher first in the past 3 years. And I kind of put something out too, that he's really been a mentor for me coming into the Middleborough community, and just a true example of how, the right way to do it as a teacher coach, and the way he carried himself day to day, and ran his classes and ran his team. So a huge loss. He's going to be sorely missed for sure.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, Mr. Chair. Just to double up on that, Bill Lawrence was a tremendous teacher, and a better guy, just a real all-around great guy. 1984 graduate of Middleborough High School, was a champion back then, was the coach of a couple of state championship teams, and just really an all-around good guy. Anyone you talk to, whether it be a fellow, he was a football official on Friday nights and Saturdays during the fall, and was in with that group, but also was just very popular amongst the staff at the high school, faculty and staff at the high school, and also he taught for a while down at the complex, and just really a tremendous guy, and he's going to be really sorely missed by the entire Middleborough Public School community. So our thoughts and prayers go out to Bill Lawrence, his mom and dad, and his wife and his son, and the entire family, extended or otherwise, and the entire Middleborough family that knew him well. Godspeed, Bill Lawrence. So, thank you. Thanks, Rye.
Any other questions for Ryan?
Okay, go ahead. Sorry, Chief.
Seeing none. Thank you, Ryan.
Next, I'm going to call Dr. Gates back to the stage, if you will, to talk about the additional survey that she worked on with Sean and put that out with regard to trying to help the school committee with some guidance from teachers, faculty, staff, administration, parents, anybody that was able to sort of submit answers or look at this survey and provide input and feedback for the school system and for the school committee. So welcome again, Dr. Gates, and thank you for coming.
Thank you, Superintendent Lynch. I'm going to share my screen again so we can all look at the data together. Hopefully I'm a little bit more fluid in my transition back. So through Mr. Siciliano, we were able to share this survey with families on June 22nd. Again, we like to push this out via multiple methods: email, text, and social media. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We also pushed out the survey to our faculty and staff via email on June 22nd. Both surveys closed on the 30th. We had over 1,000 responses from families, and 275 of our faculty and staff responded. The first slide that you see here is a representation of the feedback from our families. And as you can see, 49% of those that responded did not have a preference for how we shifted the 2 professional development days from, I believe, the December break to February break in order to accommodate our transition to our beautiful new Middleborough High School. The results from there, I guess the next most prominent one was the choice in red, which was having 1 day before and 1 day following our scheduled February break. Our faculty and staff responses were pretty evenly distributed. We had about 19% that did not have a preference, and then the most popular response from there was having the 2 days before the break. That was followed shortly by 2 days after the break, and then 1 day, one before, one after was following closely behind that. So the faculty results were pretty evenly split, while the family results, I think, were a little bit more predominant of not having so much of an opinion versus having a choice of 1 day before, 1 day after. And that's all we have from that brief survey that we did.
I'm going to Bobby back in. Thank you, Dr. Gates. I also wanted to add that one of the factors that may come into play here where we might need some flexibility in scheduling to the school committee is as we look towards next year, and as we look towards possibly a remote learning package, it's vital that we do some professional development with teachers and ESPs ahead of time with regard to their ability to more effectively work with students in a remote learning situation. It would probably require the equivalent of about 2 days of training. Now, the teacher calendar is 184 days. So that would have to be negotiated with the Middleborough Education Association and certainly approved by the school committee. Those negotiations would probably involve negotiation subcommittee to determine what those 2 days might be and how those 2 days might work. But if that were the case, if we were looking at putting the remote plan together, part of that plan may include that 2-day training piece for all faculty and staff with regard to learning how to more effectively work with the remote learning environment. So that's pretty right on, right, Dr. Gates, in terms of the plan we had sort of begun talking about and we'll work more on next Tuesday.
Absolutely, Superintendent Lynch. And also that is supported by the initial guidance put out by the commissioner, where they were advocating as well for professional development in the fall, not only for the technological needs, but in terms of promoting our safe return into the building and how we would respond to various situations that might arise. So it is quite a bit of a need for us.
Any questions regarding the survey or otherwise in the school calendar?
Anyone here have a question? Mr. Rowe.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I was going to say you can drop me for Mr. Oakley. I saw he had a question.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Oakley, you had a question.
Yeah, I think if I heard that right, we obviously want to reserve some of these days for that training for remote learning. But I think if I remember right, the days that were revolving around the school move, it was almost the equivalent of a half day to pack up and a half day to unpack, which I think would just leave one day really of PD open, right? Do I have that right?
The faculty, the teachers have a 184-day contract. So
no, I don't mean that. Conceivably, the professional development days that are set aside for them have already kind of been taken. But I thought we're just talking about these 2 days.
No, Rich, these two of these days are two of the professional development days.
Right.
So of the 184, you're down to 182. These 2 days have to be used in this fashion.
Yeah, I think we're misunderstanding. I understand that the PD days are what they are, but I thought we were talking about moving these days to allow for classrooms to pack up and unpack around the delayed school move to the new high school.
That's correct. That these would have to be around, these 2 days would have to be around the vacation time, whether they be before the vacation, one before, one after, or both after. So that's sort of what the survey was all about, looking at this particular February vacation and what the folks in the public wanted to do and recommend to you as a school committee through this survey feedback.
Yeah, sorry. So just my point is not necessarily about what these days are about, but my point is about, I think I just heard that we need to set aside 2 days for remote learning training. But if half of each of these 2 days in question is going to be spent packing and unpacking the classroom, do we have enough for that?
I think Brian's talking about two additional other days. So if you think about it that way, 184 is gone.
So what will we do with the 2 days before? Right now, we're scheduled I believe the 21st and 22nd, Monday and Tuesday of December, for these 2 days. Those 2 days would have to move now because we're not moving into the school till February.
Right.
So those days would become school days. Those 21st, 22nd, and potentially the 23rd of December to become school days, with the 24th off beyond that. So, but the 2 days would be 2 other days that we'd use for professional development, perhaps even in August if we had agreement from the association before the school year started, so that we would have that training with the faculty done before even the regular school year started or remote. Because even if we start the school year in person, there may be a spike, there may be an outbreak. Look what some of the southern states are going through right now, and closing down and such. So we need to be prepared, and that would be part of the preparation, would be these 2 professional days that would be potentially outside of the current school day or school year, and then we could look at those days moving up and say, okay, do we still want election day? And if election day were the case, and that were now one of our professional development days, then we would probably, that would be a non-school day.
Gotcha. All right, that's really helpful. Thank you. I was kind of mixing the two things there, but I get what you're saying now.
Completely understood. No problem. If nothing else on that, I can certainly move on and move to administrative team update and technology update. I think I can combine these two based on some introductions I made already. First of all, the Director of Curriculum Instruction and Technology for the district moving forward after July 1 or from July 1 on is Dr. Melanie Gates. And again, we congratulate Dr. Melanie Gates. She certainly earned it. The tech audit and the folks that did the tech audit certainly recognized her level of expertise in the tech area and certainly thought that she moving forward would be somebody that would be good in this role, perhaps. And then moving on, we had a network manager that passed away last year. Mark Mobley was a valuable part of the school district. We had not replaced him yet. We advertised the position, and we were fortunate to have Michael Mills, who had moved on to the town side of things and has opted now to move back to the school department and become our network manager. He was somebody that worked closely with Mark Mobley, is fully aware of all the systems that we used, and I think we have great potential. He's local and lives out on Vernon Street, and so we welcome Michael Mills back to the school department and back to the Middleborough Public Schools as the network manager. So that's sort of the technology department. We're also moving Sean Siciliano from sort of a generalist, if you will, and put him under the tech department heading. So he will be working closely with Dr. Gates. Katie Godine, who's also the student information management system person, as well as our central registrar, will also be under the auspices of the Office of Curriculum Instruction and Technology, as well as all those people that were in that office prior. So that office is taking new shape, new direction under the leadership of Dr. Gates. They've already started moving and shaking, and we're looking forward to the work that group does. In addition, with regard to administration, as most of you know, and I just want to outline for the public in general, we have a new Nichols Middle School principal. It's Heidi Latenda. She moves from the Early Childhood Center to the Nichols Middle School. We have a new principal at the Early Childhood Center, position obviously vacated by Mrs. Latenda, and that's Jeremy Gobeil, longtime assistant principal and longtime school administrator. He was at the HPB, and he also worked for other systems. So we welcome Jeremy Gobeil into the principalship at the Early Childhood Center. Also, we have a new high school assistant principal, Laura Luco, who comes to us from the Abington Public Schools, where she's highly recommended. Just as recently as this morning, I talked with Peter Schaefer, the school superintendent in Abington, and he couldn't praise her any more than he did. He said she's going to work out great in Middleborough, and he's glad that she's employed by us. She's moved on into the Middleborough Public Schools, and we're fortunate. Mary Kay Good School Assistant Principal, just as of this week, Jonathan Weinberg. He comes to us from the Methuen Public Schools, where he commuted back and forth from Rentham, and is going to enjoy a much nicer commute, I believe. So Jonathan Weinberg, we welcome to the assistant principalship at the Mary Kay Good School. The Mary Kay Good School former assistant principal is now a phys ed teacher at the complex, where he was a phys ed teacher before. So we certainly wish Chris Phoenix well, moving from the administration back to the classroom. I would also announce that the former principal at the Nichols Middle School is now the assistant principal at the HPB, and that is Greg Thomas. And we wish him well in his new position, and we congratulate him. Further, the coordinator of nursing position that we mentioned has been advertised and posted. We have 4 applicants at this current time. We have scheduled interviews for 3 of them next week. A couple of them have been coordinator of nursings or close to that, or some title that was close to that in a couple of different systems that were local. So we're looking forward to interviewing those folks and perhaps having an announcement at the next school committee meeting with regard to the coordinator of nursing. So those are my administrative team and technology updates in terms of the district. Lots going on, a lot of moving parts, but a lot of real quality individuals that we've been able to retain, move to other positions, and hopefully shift and make ourselves a better school system moving forward. So I'll certainly take any questions anyone might have with regard to that, or certainly any comments that you might have.
Mr. Oakley.
I don't know. You tell me if this would be a question better for another time or another topic, but I just wondered the kind of debate around Microsoft versus Google and what's going on out in the world and what's achievable for a school district to purchase. And maybe this is a question for Dr. Gates, but if we are under the technology update, I hope you think this is an appropriate question, but how do we justify that here in the district, Microsoft versus Google, and what people are going to experience when they get out into the world?
I'm of the personal belief that if you learn one platform, you can really transfer it to the other. I started in technology using just Windows Office applications and quickly could transfer that knowledge and skill into Google applications. The ease with Google in a school system is its interoperability with so many other systems. It's not just the productivity tools within Google of Google Docs, Sheets, Slides, etc. It's also its ability to partner with other applications for sign-in purposes. We also use Google as our email provider. So I just think the skills that kids are going to gain, they're going to transfer. I've never been of the belief that you need to learn a program from start to finish. It's really about acquiring skills that you can transfer at different times. So we've made a decision more so to go with Google. Chromebooks are a bit easier to manage. They're more reasonably priced. And I think it can still provide the same access to content and the same access to kids being able to demonstrate their knowledge through using a Chromebook and through Google applications. We do also have licenses for Office 360 with Microsoft. So as a team, we're going to have to work through and make some decisions because as we saw in the feedback from our families within the end of year extended learning survey, having all these platforms available became a little bit overwhelming for folks. So we're really looking to streamline to make it easier for our families, make it easier for our students, and also be able to make it easier for us as a district to support professional development and elevate people's skills instead of just constantly introducing a new platform and you learn a fraction of it. We can take what we have with Google applications and we can really expand what we're able to do in the classroom through it. So there's more conversation that needs to be had, but that is kind of the direction that we're heading at this time.
Sounds like a balanced approach.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I know at my work, I would much rather share a Google Doc with someone than I would pass back and forth a Word document with version control issues. I understand Microsoft Teams has some of that stuff, but Google's what I've been using for 10 years, and also I think the piece that you brought up about affordability, I think is important. Because as you've mentioned before, Dr. Gates and Superintendent Lynch, getting your hands on the technology, especially in a district like ours, I think all of us would want to make it easier, especially during this remote learning time when we've seen some of the technology challenges. So if it's more affordable, I think as long as there's no significant performance drop-offs, I'm totally in favor of that. So anyway, sorry, I'll put my soapbox away, but thank you very much. I appreciate the answer.
I will just say, though, that there is going to always be a need for something beyond a Chromebook because there are applications that just require more than what a Chromebook can provide. And we will still have access to those for our students, particularly in the new high school where there'll be availability to, Apple products as well as higher end Windows-based devices in our computer labs at the high school. So there'll still be that access. But I've always just felt that a Chromebook can get you through a minimum of 75% of what it is that we're asking our students to do with technology in the classroom. And that's not as a limiting component. I just think it's just being realistic with what kids are being asked to do and what they can access through a Chromebook.
Great. Thank you very much.
Good answer. And that's why Dr. Gates is the Director of Curriculum Instruction and Technology. Any other questions for Dr. Gates? I would just close my report by saying congratulations to our chair and our vice chair. Congratulations, and obviously I will be working closely with both of you and the entire committee. But and again, welcome to Teresa Farley, new member, and again, congratulations to Megan Janess, the incumbent winner, and looking forward again to working with this newly formed committee. And for production and for the best for all students in Middleborough. Apologize, we choked up there.
Before we take off from your piece, I do want to say, Mr. Lynch, thank you. The school committee asked for the technology audit. The school committee accepted the audits, what it gave us. Then we asked for you to reorganize the department, and you did that. So thank you for doing what we asked for, and we appreciate it. That being said, I'm just going to move on quickly. We'll go back to, I just want to go to consent agenda. Chair will entertain a motion to accept the consent agenda.
So moved.
Here, second.
Second.
This requires a roll call, as does everything. Ms. Farley?
Aye.
Mr. Stevens?
Aye.
Ms. Janess?
Aye.
Ms. Rowe? Mr. Rowe?
Aye.
Mr. Oakley?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. You guys all moved on me halfway through there, so I was very confused. We're going to go back because we missed the reports of the school committee members, so I do want to bring that up. I was hoping to allow, if Frank was going to come in, I just wanted to make sure. Does any school committee member have anything they wish to say? Ms. Janess?
Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who voted for me, and thank you for your continued support. I'm very honored to serve again on the committee, and I'm very excited to continue serving with all of you. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you, Meg. Ms. Farley?
Same for me. I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who put me on this committee, and I'm really excited and looking forward to this. I know this is, difficult times, but I think we're all ready for that challenge, and I look forward to this.
Thank you, Ms. Farley. And Mr. Oakley, I know you had something, sir.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you to the committee for giving me a chance to serve as vice chair. And I know with Mr. Young's attendance record, the odds that I'll actually have to jump in and run the meeting are probably low. But what I wanted to talk about it, and the reason why I was interested in doing this is because obviously, fine, maybe I won't be actually running the meeting because Rich never misses one. But what I'm really interested in this for is that I want more experience on the opportunity to, or on the duty that Rich has to set the agenda, maybe learn more about some of the ethical considerations that he has as a chair of a committee. I want to learn more about Robert's Rules of Order, running effective meetings, because I think given the scope of the school committee, I think we can all kind of agree that I think we run pretty good meetings here. I think Rich runs a pretty good meeting, and it's awesome to see how we can fit these really important things into the amount of time that we have. So I want to learn from Rich and try to take some cues from the leadership that he has on this committee, and I think it's going to be an awesome opportunity for me to learn more about that. So I just wanted to say thank you to the committee for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you, sir. And thank you for serving. I mean, you're picking up more duties, so we all appreciate that. I think we all do. Anyone else have anything they want to bring up about in this format? Seeing none, then we're going to move on with the agenda, if that's okay. I do want to bring up, just briefly, we discussed MSBA last time. You had all attended the walkthrough. We haven't had a meeting since then, so I'm not going to belabor any point. Does anyone have any questions about the school building at this point? Teresa, go right ahead.
Just only because I did not get that walkthrough, so
Absolutely.
Curious if there was anything that jumped out at anybody, or if there's something that I should be aware of that I may have missed.
I'm going to turn it over to you guys because those who attended, I've been doing this for a while, so I'll just ask any of you who did the walkthrough. Greg, go right ahead.
I guess my impressions were that I never knew so much went into a building, because you could see all the wires, all the piping. It's amazing how much is going into the planning of that building. I think my impression was, I think the design is just going to be awesome. I think it's going to be a good environment for the kids. Lots of places for breakout sessions. So my feeling was, I think it was good. Made a good impression on me.
That's great. Mr. Oaks.
Yeah, there's the emotional takeaway, which was, oh my God, this school is incredible. I wish I was going to a school like this. Just standing in that big round kind of center point and looking up at the stairs and the balcony up above, thinking about how awesome it's going to be to go there. But then there's the other piece, which was just seeing the principals there, or at least one of them, from the design team, and realizing the buy-in of all the players necessary to make this happen. I feel like we're in good hands. So that was my takeaway.
Anything else? Anybody else?
Thank you.
So there will be opportunities, Teresa, for you to visit. We will have another one at some point, so it doesn't end there. Mr. Lynch, you had a question.
Mr. Chair, if I could, I just wanted to sort of mirror what Rich Oakley just said. Teresa, I think it's important to know that we're in really good hands. We have people on board with us that went through really a painstaking process, sort of going back to our previous business manager, Kathy Piatelli, sitting down with Rob DeRosa, myself, Rich Young, going through the process of choosing an owner's project manager, and we got a really good one. And Christy Murphy is on top of things, and she runs a great meeting. She's very well organized, and she's really, I hate to put the word perfect on it, but it's a perfect, she's a perfect person for the Middleborough position. So that really worked out. DRA, the designers, between Scott Wooden and his team have been great, going back to Jim Barrett. So DRA, our designers, have been great. A couple of blips here and there we've found, but other than that, it's been great. And our builders, Fontaine Brothers Incorporated, have been really dynamite. We have a weekly construction meeting that goes from 11 to 1. Actually, today was 11 to 12:15, which was a real plus, because Christy Murphy and Scott Wooden were on vacation. That's why. But I just wanted to just mirror Rich's comments that we are in really good hands, knowledgeable hands, experienced hands, people that have built high schools and middle schools before, and they keep us apprised and the committee apprised. I also think we're in really good hands with Rob DeRosa as chairman of the committee. He does an excellent job and is open to any input. And the committee, those meetings are open to anyone and continue to be. And we have one next Wednesday at 5 p.m. So I just wanted to mention those things about sort of an update on the building. So.
Thank you so much.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
No problem. Anybody else have any questions before I move on? I am going to bring up one thing that's not on your agenda tonight, and I'm allowed to because I found out about it this afternoon. And that is that Bob Nunes had sent us a note, the superintendent and myself. The governor has decided to move to phase 3 starting Monday. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, the requirements of people allowed into space will mean that we cannot do meetings in person. We are only allowed no more than 25 people currently in an enclosed space. That would seem unfair to me if somebody wanted to attend, and I would have to turn them away, and I can't do that for a public meeting. So we'll continue in this form until we can allow people to come in, and if we needed to, we could move them to various spaces, but that's my primary reason for that. I know a lot of people like this format, and that's good, but I don't know that I can do this for a long period of time. So I'm going to do it for as long as I can. And Mr. Oakley's mentioned to me, and I know Teresa has mentioned to me in the past about could we continue this afterwards? The short answer is I don't know. It's going to require the ability to do that from the AG zones. And so I reached out with a couple of ideas for them to think about, but there won't be a decision until for quite some time. So we'll be in this place for a while. I'm going to assume the summer, and we'll go from there. But I just wanted people to know that we can't move from this meeting. Mr. Lynch, do you have something to say?
I would just add that you know, I do think this is a great forum, and I do think that the public comments, we get more people at our meeting this way, and I agree. But we really do need to work on sound quality and continue with that, because that can be a real inhibitor in terms of for the people in the public to be able to understand everything that's being said, because all it takes is a cloud overhead or a bolt of lightning or whatever, a loose cord can really sort of inhibit the meeting, and that's what makes the live meetings so much more effective. But I do agree with your point, Teresa and Rich Oakley. I think the fact that we still have, 60 people still tuned into this meeting, I think is really a factor to consider moving forward.
Mr. Stevens.
I believe, Mr. Chair, that we're only allowed to do this format because of a special exemption that the governor made, right? That
Correct.
normally we would not be able to do this under the regular open meeting laws.
Correct. And just to be clear on that, there has to be a provision passed by the Board of Selectmen, and they have chosen not to pass it in the past. I don't know if that will change given the situation we're in, but we cannot do, people can't participate remotely. There is a remote provision in the open meeting law, but Middleborough has not accepted that part of the open meeting law, so we can't do even that. But you're right, it's only under the governor's executive order. Any other questions about that? Then I will move on, seeing no one. Just want to put it out there that the MASC conference is November 4th through 7th. Although that's far away, I would just point out to people that if you can go to the conference, there's an early bird price. So I am going to the conference, as I have in the past, and the superintendent is. So let me know, and we will put you in. Teresa, got an email yesterday from the executive director of MASC. There is a course that you're supposed to take called Charting the Course. That is not online as of yet. It'll be online this summer, so you can take it from the comfort of your home. And he explained that it should be online in a couple of weeks. So he said he'd let us know, and we'll tell you about it so you can sign up. They've turned it into a lovely 6-hour course.
Great.
Just exciting, is it not, everybody?
Can I take it in
If you take it in parts, I think you have to take. I think it is right now. You take 3 2-hour sessions, so you don't have to take all 6 at once. Although in the past, you could take all 6 at once, and boy, was that glorious! Let me tell you, there's nothing like a 6-hour conference. Am I correct, everybody? The other thing, too, just related to that with the workshop, we have a new member. We have sort of our norms that we go over every year. So what I thought would be good was I'm going to bring MASC out and have a conversation about a workshop. I would probably do the workshop if I can do it over the summer via Zoom. So we can meet with them and have the conversation. It's about roles and responsibilities, and it's about relationship with the superintendent. And we do this every so often. I could be wrong. I believe it was last time we did it was when Greg came on the committee, and we did it then. And so we should update it every couple of years. So I'm going to work that out, and I'll work out extra dates with you. This will be sort of a side meeting. We'll meet with the superintendent and go from there. That makes sense, everybody? Anything else before I move into action items? Mr. Stevens.
I don't believe we took the vote on the consent agenda.
I thought we did. No, maybe I'm wrong.
Did we?
Well, that's fine. We'll go. So I'll take a motion to accept the consent agenda.
I just maybe I'm remembering it wrong.
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All right. I'll go around the Ms. Farley.
Aye.
Mr. Stevens.
Aye.
Mr. Oakley.
Aye.
Mr. Rowe.
Aye.
Ms. Janess.
Aye.
The chair votes aye. So thank you, Greg, in case I didn't do that part of it. So the two things they've asked for is we can do MASC official delegate for the school committee. Irregardless of if the conference takes place, they will still hold the that particular piece. So does anyone know they want to? I mean, we can wait on it, or you can choose me because I've been the delegate the last several years. So it's either way, it's fine. Mr. Stevens.
I make a motion that we nominate Rich Young for MASC official delegate.
Second.
If somebody else goes, we can revisit this later on. It just gets checked off on my form when I register. That's all. Any other nominations? Seeing none, we'll go in order. Ms. Farley?
Aye.
Mr. Stevens?
Aye.
Mr. Oakley?
Aye.
Mr. Rowe?
Aye.
Ms. Janess?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. And the last piece I had was, does the school committee wish to take any action on the calendar for next year? Mr. Rowe?
Through you, Mr. Chair, do you believe that it would be better to table this until we talk with the union?
Well, irregardless, this particular piece has to happen. I think what the superintendent had talked about was the idea of looking at alternative options. But as far as this piece, to be honest with you, I can't say to you to wait or make a decision without, like, this, we're contractually bound to do this. So to be honest with you, Mr. Rowe, I'd rather do it and then have a conversation, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Ms. Farley, you had a question?
Not a question, more of a comment. It just seemed as though the parents were much more neutral in their decision making, and so I feel like as the committee, we should be really kind of taking what the staff and teachers asked for, which to me seemed like the one day before and the one day after would be probably the best option or the most approved option by the staff and teachers. So I would make a motion, unless anyone has any other issues or discussions, to vote for the one day before and one day after.
Second.
Just to be clear, and if there's a motion and a second, so I don't have a problem. I don't believe that was the number one option for the teachers. It was a number one option amongst both, like, sort of the parents after the choice of that. But I think, I forget which way it was, but I don't think that was the particular favorite option of the teachers.
Mr. Chair, the teachers favored the 2 days before break.
But it was by about a 4% difference. Am I correct,
No,
Meg?
it's very close.
Okay. Mr. Oakley, you had a question?
Yeah, I was just going to say my recollection of it was that the parents and the families favored a day before, day after by a narrow margin, with almost half of them saying they didn't care. And then it seemed to me that the staff were pretty close to split among the three different options, with almost an equal amount saying they didn't care. So at least in my mind, the staff seemed split, and the parents seem to marginally favor day before, day after. So, yeah, that's, I think Ms. Farley's motion is still my preference. So my second still stands.
So I do have from Dr. Gates that 29.5% of the teachers were for the 2 days before. And I think if you subtract about 4% from that, Rich, it's about 24 and change were for the 2 days, the 1 and 1. 23.6 for the day before and day after. And like you said, it was the 49% were of parents were no change, but the next piece in that was the day before and day after. So as of right now, I have a motion on the table for a day before and day after. Any further discussion?
Thank you. If we have to adjust this, given any other guidelines that DESE comes out with for COVID, can we do that?
Yeah, I mean, the calendars are our piece. We can adjust it at any time. So just to put it in perspective, not that we do that, but as you guys know, vast majority of districts, for example, in the this past spring, ended April vacation, as is their right. So I'm not saying it's the same, but I'm just pointing out that you can say. Do you guys want me to have them bring up the data just to look at it again, that particular slide, so you can see it again?
I don't need it.
I think maybe for people watching, it might be helpful for them to see.
Okay. So Sean, if you can figure out a way to bring up the slide for me, that'd be fantastic. Dr. Gates, welcome back.
Thank you very much. Let me see if I can figure this out again. So the data that you're seeing here is the faculty responses. So the blue, again, the 29.5, which was the highest percentage, was favoring 2 days before February break for professional development. Second to that was 2 days after February break. Third was 1 day before and 1 day after. And fourth was the does not matter choice. So the predominant choices were really 2 days before or 2 days after for faculty and staff. And just as a reminder, our families, the majority did not have a preference. If they did have a preference, they wanted 1 day before and after, which is the third choice of our faculty and staff.
And just to be clear, Dr. Gates, the 2 days before and 2 days after, either one of those, or the 1 day before and 1 day after, those are working days for staff.
That is correct, sir.
So, Mr. Oakland.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I don't want it to seem like the wishes of the faculty and staff were not looked at there, but in my mind it was so close on the faculty and staff side that it almost seems undecided to me, but it was more heavily in favor of day before, day after for families. So it almost seems like, since that gap was so large, well, relatively speaking, that I want to go with that, but I'd be fine with if someone else felt strongly.
Okay. Mr. Stevens.
Yeah, I'm going to just echo what Rich Oakley said, that I think the staff, it just seemed pretty close for all the options. But the families definitely seem to prefer the 1 day before, 1 day after, which makes sense for traveling. So I would be in favor of that, of the current motion.
Okay. And just so we get an outside perspective, I do have one comment from outside that I see, and that is no more Mondays off. We have so many Monday holidays already. So I'll throw that out to you. So I have a motion on the table to do a day before and a day after vacation, which would essentially be the Friday before the vacation and the Monday afterwards. That's just for that. If this motion fails, we can look at something else and go on. So I will go in order again. Ms. Farley?
Aye.
Mr. Oakland?
Aye.
Mr. Rowe?
Aye.
Ms. Janess?
Aye.
Mr. Stevens?
Aye.
And the chair will vote aye. It's unanimous. So we will change the calendar to include the day before and day after for vacation. Those currently will be professional developments. What we'll do is I'll have a further conversation with the superintendent about his need for professional development days, and we'll go from there, and we'll get back to the committee and look at it in a wide variety of ways. Thank you for that piece, everybody. Does anyone have anything else that they want to bring up before I ask for a motion to adjourn? Again, I want to, Mr. Lynch.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to provide an update from Carolyn Lyons, our PPS director,
Sure.
who was excused from tonight's meeting. Her son had a piano recital, and I always say family first. So, but there are 48 students currently registered for our extended school year program. 48 students.
That's fantastic.
Thank
Well,
you.
tell her if she was excused, there's no need for her to watch our lovely TV show.
I'm not sure she was watching. That was the result of a text exchange.
Okay, that's fine. I'll take that, but she just still doesn't have to answer those either.
In between numbers.
Exactly. Any other comments? Mr. Oakley.
Mr. Chair, you tell me if this is the right time. I know that the extended school year program was earlier on the agenda, but hearing Superintendent Lynch's comment made me realize that I did actually have a question on that. Is that okay to ask that now?
About the extended school year program?
Yeah.
That's fine, and I don't have a problem with that. The only thing I would say is if no one can answer it, we'll wait for Caroline and have her answer it at the next meeting, if that's okay. What's your question?
Yeah, I just had a question from a parent over the last week or so about guidance on the extended school year program, and I just wanted to find out is if you are a parent and your student is taking part in that, are you getting communication from the school district on how to take part in that, or was there something about these DESE guidelines that we were all waiting for?
I will bring back the superintendent if Sean is listening to me for a long time. Brian, can you answer that question?
Alan Lyons has produced an entire manual for these folks, for any family that has a child or children in these programs. So they'll have guidance provided for them if they haven't yet, and if they need to reach out to Carolyn Lyons, they can certainly do that, or the coordinator, SPED coordinator for their particular building or the person they've been dealing with. So I would say all they would need to reach out is Carolyn Lyons, clyons@middleborough.k12.ma.us. She's an open book when it comes to such thing, very transparent when it comes to providing that type of information.
Okay, thank you very much.
Nope.
So with that, any other thing? I do want to mention a couple things. One is a person sort of came late to the program, if you will, and added 2 questions. One about the school's response to COVID, and secondly about buzzing. I would ask them to sort of play that back. When the superintendent's report starts, he immediately goes into all that information, so we won't rehash that. The second piece is that this will be sort of my summer reminder. When information becomes available to us, we will share. When the school puts together plans, we will share them, and we will put them out for people to see, and much more importantly than that, we will put them out for people to be able to review and comment on them. We think that's important. We don't do this in a bubble, and we're not hiding things from people. And I say this over and over again, and I'll say it 100 times till I turn blue in the face. If you have questions, feel free to ask one of us. Feel free to ask the superintendent. Our email addresses are all out there. Our telephone numbers are generally in the book. You can call us if you need to. So don't get your answers from somebody that doesn't know. Feel free to ask the people who can get you the answers and get the answers that way. Because again, I've seen, as I talked about before, I saw a lot of people get upset about a guidance plan that came out, which was essentially a notice about PPE equipment, and people were worked up about what they saw. But if you read the full memo, which was 7 pages long, you saw that it had to do with things in place now. And I think that's the biggest thing. I think if you look, for example, at the guidance that happened for childcare, that guidance has changed after 2 weeks. And so I imagine that guidance will change. We are 2 months away from school opening. I imagine that other things like athletics and busing, they are waiting as long as they can to add guidance to, because they hope things will change. So I just want to put that out there, if that makes sense to everybody. And we'll go from there. And with that, the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Just no discussion. Ms. Farley?
Aye.
Mr. Rowe?
Aye.
Mr. Janess?
Aye.
Mr. Oakley?
Aye.
Mr. Stevens?
Aye.
And with that, we all wish everybody out there watching a happy 4th of July, and we'll see you next time. Thank you, everybody.